Are we doing an intro or anything like that?
Uh, this is the Disgruntled Crab and Rusty Culture most professional review show! So here we are. We had a very odd situation with this. I don't know if we're going to call it a review. It might be more of a retrospective / therapy session. Because the reason I picked this one, I don't know if you're familiar with the history of Watership Down.
Not even a little bit. So I'm
Okay.
ready for the education.
So this was a cartoon that was released in 1978. And I believe until a year ago, this was rated G. So this has the history of traumatizing a generation of children, because you look at the cover and it's a happy cartoon bunny movie, and it's rated G. So we'll rent it and then plop the kids in front of the TV while cooking supper or doing the dishes. And then the children are like, why are the bunnies bleeding? Why are they dying? What is going on? So kind of with this one, I'm gonna be sitting in my couch, just laying down. You can kind of be the therapist of this one.
Oh boy.
Because going
We're
through
unpacking
this,
childhood trauma.
we're
here.
unpacking childhood trauma. But looking back on it, actually watching it now, it was interesting because there were certain things that were burned into my memory. And there was things as I was watching it that were coming up. It's like, oh, I remember this, even though it was buried. But for the most part, there's some really good animation in this thing. And in my opinion, it's a decent story. It's not groundbreaking, but it is well told. It's unfortunately it's rated incorrectly, and a lot of people were traumatized by this in their childhood. So you're going to have kind of a fresh view of this, having survived your childhood without being exposed to this thing. And I kind of want to hear your opinion on this, because this was intriguing watch for me.
So when you pitched this to me after one of our recording sessions, you told me not to look up anything about it because it's better if I go in fresh, which I did. And what I was expecting, because of that description you gave to me, was this was going to be like one of those where it's like, it seems like an innocent cartoon and it turns out to be gory and awful, and I hate those. And I really thought that that's what this was going to be. Now, I mean, I was sort of right because there's blood and stuff in it, but it's not gore for the sake of gore, which I really appreciated. And I was really surprised that I actually ended up really enjoying this. You're right. The animation is beautiful, especially that opening sequence is awesome. It's so artistic. It's one of the, and I usually don't get into like artsy stuff, but it was just so well done. Everything was so stylized, and it just had this awesome feel and tone to it. And then you get into the actual film after the intro, and it continues that beautiful, it's a different style now, but it's still a beautiful new style of animation. Very simplistic, simple. I assume that this didn't have a lot of money behind it, but it still works really well. I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. I agree, it's nothing groundbreaking. It's nothing, it's not gonna blow anyone's socks off unless you're a child thinking this is a G movie, I guess, but it's good. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
I was just curious how it would stand up, because unfortunately, as I'm watching it, it's not like a trauma that I was like tortured by, but I just remember like there's things that stood out to me as I was watching it that I was like, I remembered it. I remembered the bird and big water. I also remember, I don't know how this stuck in my memory, because if I recall, I only watched this once and I was really young when I did. But I remember the actual definition of the road that Bigwig calls it. I was like, it's a roo-doo-doo. I knew that's exactly what he called it. I don't know why that stuck in my memory. And then the very ending, there was images that were burned into my memory that have always been there. It's like when I thought of this movie, I thought of the ending, because it was for when I watched it when I was so young. It just burned itself in there. So I don't know if we want to kind of break it down. We could probably say, for the most part, this is, again, it's over 40 years old, but looking back on it, if you're a teenager and above, definitely watch it. It's actually a good story. It's got some great animation. The backgrounds, they're some amazing, they look like they're watercolor paintings that they're using for backgrounds, and they have the animation cells over the top of it. So most of the characters, for the most part, are pretty simplistic, but all of the backgrounds look like beautiful art.
And to be clear, this is not something that's going to traumatize you as long as you know what it is going in. The traumatic aspect of it, I imagine, is thinking that this is an innocent kids movie when it's not that. It has some adult moments in the animation, not anything inappropriate per se, in the sense that you might be thinking when I say the word adult, but just the themes are adult. There's death in this. There's real death. There's real danger. There's themes of, fascism and government and all of these things, corruption, things that aren't typical in a kid's film, because this is not a kid's film. But it's nothing where you're not going to watch it knowing that this is an adult production and come out of it having nightmares. At least I don't think you will.
Unless you're like 6 to 9 years old, which
right.
Most people that watch this movie, that was about the age they saw this. I know there are threads online where people are discussing it. Basically, who else was traumatized by this? And it's just people chiming in. It's like, yeah, I saw that when I was a little kid and it messed me up.
So yeah, full spoilers. I recommend the watch if you haven't seen it. I'd recommend the watch before listening to this. So now's your chance. Now's your chance to step away. Now's your chance to run away, to dive to your phone, to get out of the shower, to pause it, to stop doing whatever you're doing and stop listening and go watch this. All right, here we go. Do we just want to go through it? I have a summary in front of me.
Oh, you got a summary? I'll let you do the summary this time.
Sweet. So this starts out in, and this is helpful to have the summary in front of me, because one comment I will make on the story as we dive into it is I found some of it a little hard to follow. It wasn't incredibly difficult, but some things I got kind of confused and I had to rewind at some points, and especially remembering the characters, because while the characters, the major ones, have defining traits, they do kind of blend in with each other at points.
Yes, you can. Some of the characters, the character models are basically the same. So unless they're talking to each other and you're just seeing them hopping around because they're rabbits, it is a rabbit movie, it's sometimes hard except for the really distinct ones like Bigwig, who basically has a tuft of hair that looks like a wig. That's why he's called Bigwig.
And he's just bigger than everyone else too. So this starts off in, I didn't know the name of it either, the Sandalford Warren, and the Warrens are kind of these areas where the rabbits make their homes. Well, actually, I should rewind because this isn't in the summary. It opens with this origin story, this sort of mythology of rabbits, which I thought was really cool. And I wonder if is that based off anything? Is that mythology based off of any real myth?
I have no idea. I got the impression that this entire thing was kind of based on, here is what rabbits think of the world. So this was kind of mythology of the rabbits. That's the understanding I got from it.
Yeah. So from memory, because this isn't in the summary, the mythology of rabbits is that this great being, Frith was the name?
Yep.
Frith created creatures, and they were all pretty much the same. And there was this one prince who was a rabbit, and this rabbit was very arrogant and pompous and refused to follow the will of Frith. So Frith, the god of this mythology, curses the rabbit, or more so, makes it so that all the other animals, he gives them unique traits and makes it so they want to kill rabbits and equip them to kill rabbits. So the rabbits are slaughtered, and then finally Frith reaches out to this rabbit who claims to not be the prince anymore and offers him a blessing. And the rabbit is hiding in a hole with his butt sticking up, and he says, well, fine, if you're not going to come out, I'll just bless your bottom. And he gives the rabbit a fluffy tail and long and strong back legs, and says, now, as long as you are cunning and you are quick and all these things, your people will always survive, despite the fact that the whole world is trying to kill you. And that is kind of the mythology of these rabbits. And to just start with that, that's so cool, because I asked if it was some sort of real myth, because it feels like it could be. And that, I just thought that little segment was so well written and so well animated, and hopefully you'll be able to throw some clips of it up here, because it's just beautiful. again, I'm not someone who's interested in art, but just looking at this as it's playing on screen here, it's such an amazing style. It's so well done, and I absolutely loved it.
And don't forget all the stylized bunny death that happens right away in the little fairy tale.
Absolutely.
Like, wow, this starts off. It's like starts off a little dark.
Yeah, it sets up what it is. So then we get into the actual story, which centers, like I said, the Sandalford Warren where these rabbits live, and there's a rabbit named Fiver. And this confused me at first. He's just straight up a psychic, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so at first I thought, well, what is going on here? Because he sees this vision of blood in the fields, and he sees it around, there's like human footprints, and he sees this blood in the field, and it's like, he takes it as an omen of destruction coming to the Warren. And he sees it with his brother, who he kind of convinces his brother, but his brother's not fully on board. And so they decide to go to the chief, which is called, I'm going to try my best to pronounce this because a lot of names in here and words that are hard to pronounce, but the Threara, which is just the chief of the rabbits, who is this big old fat old rabbit who they approach, and they basically explain to him they need to leave. They need to leave. This bad thing is happening. But the chief rabbit says, no, we're staying here. And as the rabbits leave, he kind of makes some comments on, well, why would you ever want to leave? Like, this place is great. Those guys are crazy. And they're then accosted by this other rabbit called Captain Holly, who is part of, and you find out that this rabbit society kind of has like a caste system, and that's displayed here where, you have your warrior class, you kind of have your like worker class, your poverty-stricken rabbits, and then you have your upper class rabbits who are part of like the ruling, which is what the chief rabbit would be in. And again, just a really cool structure to take this system of rabbits and to throw them into a sort of real world system of governing that's going on here. And so Captain Holly, who is part of this military caste, says, you're trying to create a revolution. You're trying to create dissent amongst all the rabbits against the leader, and tries to tell them that they can't leave, but eventually they are able to escape and leave the Warren. And it doesn't say here how many. There are 9 of them. There are 9 rabbits who end up going with, who the group convinces to leave the Warren. And this all happens in the span of like 8 minutes, which is kind of crazy.
Yes, this is very condensed storyline. So it leads to some odd situations, but you can kind of forgive it because it is like most movies of the time. It's right around the 90-minute mark. Basically, this is a movie. We're here to tell the story, get in, get done. We don't need to drag this out. It doesn't need to be a 3 or 4 hour epic, which unfortunately is kind of where movies are going now. It's like, it doesn't need to be extremely long to tell a good story. You can condense things. You can combine scenes to tell character motivations, plot direction, and setting. So there's things you can do in the time you have to condense a story. Everything doesn't need to be 2.5 to 3.5 hours long.
And that's, I agree. That's probably the thing I appreciated most about this. And I think maybe why it kept me so engaged is it moves at a clip. Everything happens, right away. There's not a lot of filler time in here. And to be honest, we don't need the filler time in this. It's rabbits. I don't think we need to get to know each individual rabbit. And we do get little glimpses into their personality. Whereas we have like Bigwig and Silver, which are both part of that military caste I mentioned before. And they end up joining the group, and they kind of protect the rabbits. You have Hazel, who is the brother of Fiver, who kind of starts becoming the leader. And you get this cool dynamic where he was kind of a nobody who has now risen to this position where these other rabbits respect him and follow him. What else do we have? The next major event we get is go ahead.
Oh, well, don't forget about the one doe they have, the one female of the group, Violet.
Ah, yes, Violet.
Blink and you'll miss her.
Right. She's not even in this summary.
Because they stop at one point for a rest in basically a field of either corn or something, some type of crop. It's a field and they're resting. She happens to go out and eat some little leafy plant and then gets scooped up by a hawk, and she's gone from it. Barely introduced. The only time we get to know her name is when Fiver's like, Violet's gone. And that's it.
Also, that was a hilarious way they do that. She's just chilling on the grass, and then boom, and you just see feathers kind of float down.
And apparently, I drew that as a kid. The talons coming down. Apparently, that was in there at some point.
Okay, so as they're kind of traveling, they they encounter some things. They cross a river at one point, which they use to escape a dog. They run into a badger, a couple other things. There's a car, and this is the car scene that you remember, where they find a road, and they don't know what the road is, and this it's a crow, right?
No, Bigwig knows what the road is. He's describing the road to the rest of them.
Oh, Bigwig. So Bigwig is describing the road and what it is, and it's a, what is it?
It's a roo-doo-doo.
A roo-doo-doo. And they're scared. They explain how like this roo-doo-doo, this road, is something that allows humans, and what do they call humans again?
Man.
They just call them man. And they talk about how man uses this to travel, and the rabbits get all scared.
Hazel's asking, well, they'll realize we're here. And Bigwig's like, no, they won't even pay any attention to us. See, watch. And he sits right in the middle of the road and almost gets hit by a car.
Yeah. The first one goes right by, and then he's like, see? And then the second one, coming on the other side of the road, almost smokes him.
And this is where, if you didn't realize it, we are in England, because they're driving on the wrong side of the road.
So after, all these events, this is where it kind of started to get weird for me. And I kind of started to settle into what this movie was. And it's when they meet another rabbit whose name is Cowslip. And Cowslip is kind of on his own in this field that kind of seems too good to be true. And he invites them to come to his warren, his home. And most of the group are kind of like, yeah, we can go here. This is going to be really cool. But Hazel, and I think Fiver as well, are nervous about this. And they just think something doesn't seem right. Eventually, they do end up going into the warren. And there's just I'm going to let you take this section because I was really confused here.
Basically, from what I understand, because all of the rabbits that are in the warren are kind of hiding off to the side, and there are carrots that are dropped off by man that feed the rabbits. So Hazel and his group eat to their heart's content, and then they go out in the field. And I think this was supposed to be basically a trapper's den. So it seemed like this warren was pulling other rabbits in to keep the trappers at bay by basically feeding other rabbits to the trappers.
Okay, that makes sense. So they are in order, to appease man, they are sacrificing rabbits that they lure in.
And this is one of the scenes that typically traumatized a lot of children.
Ah, yes, because we have a snare. And Bigwig, who you come to actually really like throughout this whole story, gets caught in a snare. And he gets it wrapped around his neck. And the other rabbits, they find a stake in the ground, which the snare is attached to. And they're frantically digging at it, and they can't get it out. And the camera will keep panning over to Bigwig, or cutting over to Bigwig, who blood starts pouring out of his mouth as he's being choked by this snare. And I can totally see how this would traumatize a child, because it's not gory. It's within the style of the animation, but it's a little disturbing to be watching this rabbit die in front of you, who you've grown to like, and is one of the prominent rabbits. Do you remember that scene from being a child?
I guess I do. It was one of those, there's a rabbit with a snare wrapped around its neck, and it's choking to death, and it's not gratuitous. It's kind of what would happen with rabbit in a snare. It's just something you don't expect to see in a G-rated bunny movie.
And I think what really adds to this scene and makes it so good and adds to that feeling of suspense, because it is a good scene despite it being traumatizing to children, it's good within the overall context of the movie, is the urgency of the other rabbits. And that's kind of what builds the tension here, because if you could have just had him tied up and they're all watching him die, and then it's just a sad scene, whereas it becomes a tense scene by the use of these rabbits panicking and trying to dig out the stake. And they're not able to get it, and they can't quite get it, and they're taking turns going in there to try and dig it out as this rabbit is bleeding out. And then finally they pull the stake out of the ground, yet Bigwig seems to die anyway. And it then does something I hate it when movies do, and it fakes his death, where he kind of seems to die and all the rabbits mourn, and you get the sad moment, but then nope, he's still alive. And I'm like, come on, man. Not that I wanted him to die because I liked him, but I just don't like when movies cop out like that and they want to get the emotional moment, so they fake the death, and it takes away all the gravity of the scene that we just watched.
I would say they're rabbits though, so it's not like they can provide CPR. So it seems like he might have gotten, when it loosened up, it's not like they can check his pulse because they're rabbits. So they might have assumed he was dead when he wasn't really. So I'll give it a slight pass, even though, again, it traumatized me as a little kid.
So at this point, they have another. All the rabbits are named after like plants and fruit, which I thought was kind of cool, because at this point, except for Bigwig, and at this point, another rabbit named Strawberry joins, who is pretty irrelevant again. And this one's a male, and it joins, and it was part of Cowslip, who was the weird rabbit, because his wife, his doe, was killed by a snare. So Fiver starts to have visions again, and he starts to see a home, somewhere where they can live, somewhere where they can find peace. And they find an area called Watership Down, and they begin to dig a new warren, and then suddenly Captain Holly, from the beginning of the film, who's the one who tried to make them stay in the original warren, shows up, and he's badly injured. And he explains to the group that awful things have happened, that the warren that they lived in, the holes were filled in and people were trapped, and that the ground was torn up around them. And you come to see that it was because humans were setting up a farm. They were plowing the fields, they were tilling the fields for a farm. And one of the rabbits makes a great comment that he says, "They've always hated us. Man has always hated us." And another rabbit, I don't remember which, says the line, something along the lines of, "No, they don't hate us. We're just in their way." And I love that line because it's you could have so easily did the man or the enemy, whoever your enemy is, just wants to kill us. They want to take us over. But no, they went for this approach of they were just in the way.
You also forgot the very disturbing, again, this is another scene that was kind of etched in my memory, is the rabbits, as Captain Holly is describing this, them being trapped in the warren because all of the holes were filled in. So the rabbits are suffocating in the warren before they're being torn up. So it's showing these stylized rabbits suffocating in these tunnels. And it's another one that's like, wow, this was really creepy when I was a kid.
The description is horrifying too that the rabbit gives. He talks about how and the paths were blocked by the bodies, and we couldn't get past the bodies. There were so many bodies. It's horrifying in the same way like when you watch a war movie is horrifying. So again, I'm just trying to emphasize it's not overly gruesome. It's not it's just real is what it is. It does the animation, it does the story in a real way. So, but I just loved the fact that idea of, no, you aren't hated. They're not trying to just exterminate you for extermination's sake. You're just in the way. They don't care about you. And it plays off that theme we see with the cars, where that's the first time we're introduced to the fact that man just doesn't care about you. They don't care about you enough to purposely come after you on the road. They also don't care enough to let you get out of the way when you're in their way.
And in the road scene, we forgot to mention, there was actually, where they crossed the road, there was already some type of roadkill on the road already.
Right, which just sets up this idea.
Didn't Captain Holly, didn't he go to the warren what's the main villain's name?
Oh, General Woundwort.
Yes, because he had a mark on him and one of his ears was broken.
Yes, so he has this mark on him because we're introduced to a big villain who runs this sort of police state, sort of fascist rabbit government, which is just kind of funny to say, a fascist rabbit, but that's really what he is. And not using fascist in the way it's commonly used just to hurl insults at people, but a genuine fascist dictator rabbit who he marks rabbits with wounds, and it's a way of controlling and intimidating, and he doesn't let any other warrens or rabbits exist around him because he wants to be the only one. And this is where my memory of this starts to get a little hazy. The group then decides to go and find him, right? Or does the general come to them?
At first, they try and collect rabbits from the farm because they set up their warren. Yes. but unfortunately, they're all male rabbits. So unless they do something, they'll be Great Warren until they die because they can't carry on their generations.
And this is where they meet. Okay, I found where I am in the thing.
Yeah, they go to the farm and they meet Clover, and I thought she played a bigger part, but apparently she didn't. My memory was faulty in that.
Okay, so then, yes, this is what I was thinking of. So they end up hearing from Holly about this place called Ephrafa, which is an overcrowded warren, which is where this general woundwort hails over or rules over. So they think, well, this is an overcrowded place. Surely they can give us some does. So Holly, who is the captain, decides to go there with a small group. And in the meantime, this is when they go to the farm, Hazel and another rabbit named Pipkin, who we haven't talked about, where they have an encounter with a rabbit, or with a cat who chases them, and they manage to outsmart the cat, which shows the cunning that was described in the opening, the intro. And they actually end up being saved by a little girl who yells at the cat to stop chasing them. And she is the owner of female rabbits that they find in a cage. And then they end up going back. I don't remember this. Hazel gets shot?
Yes, Hazel gets shot.
Why don't I remember that?
Because we forgot to mention Kira, because he's introduced before that.
Yeah. Kira. You go ahead and introduce Kira.
So Kira, did they say what type of bird he is?
A black-headed gull.
Okay, I was about to say, he seemed like some type of seagull. Seems to be very simple. He has understanding of things, but he's perpetually loud. And he's been injured. I can't remember exactly how he was injured. One of his wings was injured, so they allow him to stay in the warren. And he heals up, and they ask him to go find some does. So he goes off looking for does.
And he's the one who finds Ephrafa.
Yes.
Ephrafa.
I can't remember if he's exactly the one that finds it or if Holly gave them the directions. Because I remember I could have swore that Holly was basically, I'm not going. But they go to the farm because they were trying to get the domesticated rabbits to basically have some does to come back with them. And they set up a plan where the rabbits are chewing away at the cage, at the front of the cage, to let them out. And they actually get all of the rabbits to escape, but they're domesticated rabbits, so they don't know what to do. So when the farmers show up with the shotguns and the rabbits take off, they fire off the shotgun, and one of the rabbits is hit, so you don't know exactly who it is because there's 3 rabbits, and they basically all look the same. Until they get back to the warren, and then Fiver's looking for, where's Hazel? And they're like, Hazel was shot. So Fiver sees a vision, and he goes out into the field looking for Hazel, and he finds him, but he's been injured, so he doesn't know what to do. So Kira has the solution to it. You have to get out the little black stones to stop the injury. So he uses his beak to basically pull out the bird shot that Hazel had been hit with.
So Holly does go with the initial group, and that is when he gets injured. So Holly goes to make the request to Ephrafa and General Woundwort, who then doesn't want to let Holly and this embassy of rabbits leave, and then they do end up escaping. So that's when he gets the wound.
Yes, that was before. So I think you might be seeing a synopsis of the book.
Oh, maybe I am.
Yes, because some of this is...
Oh, good heavens, I am.
Yes.
What a silly goose I've been.
That's why I was like, I could have swore Holly was...
I know, that's why I was reading it, and some of it, I was like, I don't remember this.
Yes, so some of the events were condensed for the movie.
Don't listen to me, folks. Hang on, let me get one for the film.
That's what's like, I don't remember them actually saying that the warren was Watership Down in the movie.
Well, because I remember wondering why it was called that.
Yeah, I don't think they say it in the book. They're basically, if I remember right, Fiver was saying that their warren would be up on a hill with a view all around, and that's what they find. But I don't remember them calling it Watership Down in the movie.
Okay, yeah. So here we go. Now that I'm on the right track here, Captain Holly has heard about this place called Ephrafa.
He went there. And he was allowed to escape with
a wound.
Yes, but what's her name?
Heisenflay.
There we go. Heisenflay, yes.
Who we see in a scene. Now this is making so much more sense to me. I was like, did I watch a different movie when I was reading that synopsis? This makes so much more sense. Because we see Heisenflay.
I don't think Strawberry's in the movie. I don't remember Strawberry at all.
So Heisenflay, we see in an earlier scene, like, petitions the general that she wants to start. She suggests like they go out and they start a new warren because they're so overcrowded. And then the general says no, and then instructs his soldiers to keep an eye on her. So that's kind of how we learn that she wants to leave. So then the bigwig and then the rest of our rabbits, they basically end up helping with Heisenflay, who has now come back with Holly. They all end up freeing a bunch of doe rabbits and other rabbits who escape and end up coming to their warren now. And now they've got their does. Everything seems like it's going to be great.
You forgot to mention that Bigwig infiltrates as a spy. And he's there for a day, unfortunately, in the movie. So it seems like the general is really dumb. I'm assuming this goes over a longer section in the book. But it seems like the general is just like, yeah, it's cool. You're here.
Yeah, he basically just shows up and they're like, yep, you can be a patroller now.
And he starts right away. It's like, let's get out of here. Okay.
Yep. And that is something you could say is a weakness of this story moving at a clip. But it's really, really the only one that I can think of in the movie where I was kind of like,
It's an ill-fitting uniform you got there, soldier. Yeah, I haven't got down there to get the correct outfit yet, but I'll have it tomorrow, sir. What's that guy doing over in the car? He's sleeping it off. He was drunk all night. I didn't take his uniform.
All right. So and while doing his infiltration, that's where he recruits these other rabbits, and then they are able to escape with the help of Kiar. And this is when they find the boat, right?
Yes.
They use
what they learned before about floating with wood. They have a boat.
Which they use to escape Ifrafra. And this is where they think everything is going to be great. But then the I cannot say this word, Ephrafen
yes.
trackers, they then show up at Watership Down, which we don't know is called Watership Down. And Hazel tries to offer peace and is like, hey, we can just coexist and it's going to be great. But the general, who's this decrepit rabbit, who we get a better look at him now in the light.
He is old, but he is vicious. So
right.
he may look decrepit, but he is extremely tough. He's had a hard life. One of his eyes is blind, probably
decrepit's the wrong word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beaten up.
Yes. He's led a hard life, but he is in charge for a reason because he is one of the toughest rabbits.
Which is just kind of funny to think about. You know, like you don't typically think of rabbits as being tough.
Except rabbits can be really vicious. And that's kind of what this movie shows is like rabbits are kind of violent.
Are they really in real life?
They can be. I believe there's some territorial stuff. I could be wrong. Making it up as I go.
Hey, I'll believe it. Sounds cool, so I'll believe it. That's typically how I roll with stuff. Anyway,
the way I understand that their really strong legs can actually do some damage.
Oh. So Woundwort basically demands that all of he calls them deserters, need to be returned. Otherwise, they are going to destroy our rabbits' warren, Watership Down. So they basically refuse that, and they start to get ready for an assault, and they start to cover the entrances to the warren. And you'd think that this would be giving Holly PTSD because he escaped from a warren that was being covered up, but it doesn't. And then this part was really weird where it turns into a fever dream that Fiverr has.
Yes.
And we're in another part that I didn't really understand.
Well, his kind of reaction to the attack triggers Hazel's memory of them escaping from the dog. So that's why he comes up with the solution They're not that
it's
far away
through
from the
that
farm.
vision. Okay.
Yes. So part of it was the vision of Fiverr, but he recalls that when they had their discussion, that's why it has the little echoey thing. There's a dog loose in the woods. There's a dog loose in the woods. It's him remembering how they had to escape from the dog. And he's like, there's a vicious dog at the farm there. We could use that to our advantage. So basically, he leaves with 3 or 4 rabbits to set up a relay race so that they can keep ahead of the dog and bring him to the warren to face the Ephrafa.
And then one of my favorite parts happens where, so the Ephraphens, they get into the warren basically, and Woundwort is like, I'm going in because I'm awesome. And this one rabbit tries to like...
He's like, I'm going to defeat their chief Bigwig, because he thinks Bigwig is the chief of this.
Yeah. But then this other rabbit who's named Blackavar, which I didn't know, this is like, I'm going to stop him, and then Woundwort just wipes the floor with him. It's like not even a fight. And I was like, this is awesome. But so then Bigwig then like ambushes or jumps onto Woundwort, and they end up in a fight, and it kind of ends up being like it's the fight doesn't conclude, but they get to a point where it's like they are evenly matched through this fight, and they're like having like a little showdown, and then the dog shows up and just starts massacring rabbits.
And this is the part that I fully remember from my childhood. I don't remember all of the dog killing all the rabbits outside until I saw it. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that.
This is another moment where Woundwort is like, I got this. And he goes away from Bigwig and he goes after the dog. And we don't really see the conclusion of it. And it says right here in the summary, no trace of Woundwort is ever found, which leaves his fate a mystery.
Yes. And that scene at the end of the movie, that is one of the things that has been burned into my mind, is that dog with blood all around its jowls from having killed all these other rabbits, launching through the air, and then General Woundwort with blood all over his face, and a vicious scowl dives at the dog. I remember those two scenes coming together, and I was like, that's in my memory, and apparently that will be there for all eternity.
And for the story, it totally works, because Woundwort is built up as this, like this awesome, tough rabbit. But in reality, it's so funny to think of a rabbit trying to fight a dog. Like there's no chance there. The rabbit dives at the dog kills the rabbit, end of story. But in this, it really does work, because you become, and that's a testament to how well done this is it's believable, at least within the context of the film. You have this rabbit who's been built up to be very strong. You've seen him in action. He's very tough, and it builds up this mystery of, yeah, he probably died, but we don't know. Maybe he's still out there. And then we do a time jump, right?
Yep, we do a time jump where the warren is prospering. Hazel is extremely old, and the Prince of Rabbits basically calls him to the rabbit afterlife, and he lays down and passes away. So another thing that happens in this just cute bunny movie is that the main character lays down and passes away at the end. Which, again, when you're a small child who hasn't even been introduced into most of these concepts, has suffered through a lot of these things.
You're a young child who's like, I'm never going to die. That's something that old people do. I'm not old. I'm a child.
But why are these rabbits dying? What's going on? Why are they all bloody?
Mom, what is murder? Well, anyway, that is the story, and you even got part of the book there. Inadvertently. This is a very professional show. We do our research ahead of time.
Yep. Wouldn't have it any other way.
But my thoughts of this is a very simple story, but not everything has to be super complex. Something being simple doesn't make it bad. And this is a good testament of it. Now, if you were to put this same story over a CGI, very bland, computer animated film, I don't think I would like it as much. And I think the animation of this and the style of this is what really carries this. And it supplements a mediocre is not the right word for the story, but just plain good. A good story that would be boring and simplistic and bland if it was not accompanied by this great animation style. At least that's what I think.
Which is interesting that you say that, because Netflix redid this last year. They released a CGI Watership Down. So
Really?
that might be something we have to touch base.
Is it gory?
I have no idea.
Gory is the wrong word, but is there blood?
I have no idea. I haven't heard anything of it. I saw it and I was like, oh great, there's another, we can torture another group of children.
Yeah.
Another generation of children can be traumatized by this.
But yeah, I really liked it. Overall, I really liked it. I think people out there should watch it if they haven't watched it. It's good. And
I would say, if you remember it from your childhood and you were traumatized, and like, I'm never watching that again, you should actually watch it, because it helps put salve on those wounds that you had before, because there's really actually not that much horrifying stuff. It's all right mostly at the end.
Yeah.
So for the most part, there's a couple spots, the snare, and I think probably Fiver's original bloody dream that he sees. That's a little warped if you were a kid. The snare, and then the rabbits dying in the war, and then the final battle. That's probably the most disturbing scenes. But for the most part, it's just a story.
Right. And again, it's not even that disturbing when you're viewing it as an adult. It's disturbing to a child for sure, but as an adult, it's not. This is in reality, I think this is probably like a PG-13.
Yeah, probably along those lines, because there's it's not gratuitous, but there is blood from attacks and stuff. It's actually more, I can't believe I'm saying this, more realistic than the first X-Men movies. Because in all of those movies, Wolverine is going around stabbing lots of people with his claws. And there's not a single drop of blood, because they want to keep it out of that R rating. So there's my hot take. This is Watership Down. The original cartoon is more realistic than the first X-Men movie.
Absolutely, I agree.
Fight me, internet.
So I just want to thank everybody for tuning into this, and I have to put in a little plug here at the end, because I am the host of another show. It's actually a podcast called Full of Shit, and you can find it on Spotify. Just type in Full of Shit, the 3 words, and it's basically just a wacky show where we just discuss just about anything. And that typically comes out on Fridays.
And also you can find the link in the description of this video. You can join us again. We'll be releasing one every week. So if you enjoyed this, come back, recommend it to somebody, check out Full of Shit on Spotify, and we'll catch you next time.
One of the things we say on Full of Shit all the time is, if you really want to help the show, take one of your friends' phones and then subscribe to this channel forcibly without them knowing. And then maybe one day they will stumble across it and they'll watch it, and you've planted the seeds. You've indoctrinated another fan.
Perfect.